Hey, howdy, hey, and welcome back to Regenerative Farming News. I'm your host, Heather Heinrichs, a former journalist turned farmer and passionate advocate for regenerative farming. I'm so excited to have you back for another episode. My guest this week has a very unique perspective in regards to regenerative farming, and I'm so excited to share our conversation and tell you her story. But first, we have some news to cover. A quick update on the prairie harvest status, which is basically wrapping up, and an interesting video that I found about pushing the limits of yields per acre in corn. It highlights the pressure the big chemical farm companies put on the farmers. As always, you can find the show on our website, social media pages of Facebook and Instagram. Click that follow button, and thank you to everyone who is sharing the show and our social media posts. You can find the link to the website through the Facebook or Instagram pages. And without further ado, let's dive in. Well, harvest is moving fast across the prairies this week. Saskatchewan jumped to about 84% of the crops now in the bin, while Manitoba sits around 72%, and Alberta is still the closest at 89%, most of that in cereals. Warm, dry weather has sped things up everywhere, especially in southern Alberta and Saskatchewan. Canola remains the slowest crop to finish, and wetter pockets in Manitoba have some cereals that are showing quality downgrades. Overall, it's a mixed harvest, good progress, decent yields, but the usual prairie story where some farms are celebrating and others are still waiting for the fields to dry. Which reminds me of a farmer that Kevin Elmy spoke about here on the podcast. He was able to get out in his fields earlier than his neighbors because his cover crop that was growing underneath the canopy of his cash crop firmed up the soil enough for him to drive his combine into the field, and when his neighbor saw it, he tried as well and sunk his combine into the mud. Regenerative practices are good for saving water when it's dry and for using it and keeping strength in the ground when there's too much. I found an interesting video on the Ag Agronomy TV website this week. It was filmed at Canada's Outdoor Farm Show in Ontario in September. The video shows one of the crop plots at the Maizex booth that was dialed in for a specific goal: 300 bushels of corn per acre. An agronomist with Maizex Seeds for Ontario talked about what their team did in order to reach that target and how accessible a goal it is for Ontario corn growers. Now, I know that was over in Ontario, but corn crops have become quite a popular thing out here in Western Canada as well. This video, I thought, was a great example of how big farming companies are still pushing farmers to focus on getting the biggest yield per acre on monocrops, pushing every kind of fertilizer possible with a narrow-minded focus that ignored soil health completely. But the agronomist in the video did say something that I found very interesting. He said, quote, "We're still exploring the biological world to see if maybe there's a play there to increase kernel mass or increase stress tolerance," end quote. I find this so fascinating because it shows that these big companies are basically at odds with regenerative farming because they can't make nearly as much profit when the soil is making its own nutrients and feeding the crops with natural fertilizers. I am not surprised that they are trying to find a way to monetize what Mother Nature already does for free. When he says they are exploring the biological world, I highly doubt that means that they will back down from pushing farmers to push yields. And this is part of the struggle that farmers face. They really are caught in the middle. Consumers are watching documentaries about natural, healthy, regenerative farming, and they want their food to be grown that way. But big input companies are waving cash in the air, promising higher and higher yields. Farmers have to make a living, and naturally are always going to do what's best for their business, because their business is their home, and oftentimes it's where they're raising their family. And so far, the system pays the farmer by the bushel or by the pound. So it makes sense that it's difficult for farmers to look at their land and believe that it can be equally or more profitable without the chemical pushing. Notice that I said profitable, not equal yield. The chemicals produce the bigger yield much faster. That's just the truth. But the sacrifice is that we are watching our soil slowly die. Where I used to farm in Alberta, one rancher told me that the native prairie woolgrass used to be knee-high on all the pasture land in the area. I was shocked to hear that, because nowadays you're doing good if it's ankle-high, at best. The land, especially in the drier areas, is slowly desertifying, and chemicals are a huge part of the problem. And most of us know that these chemicals are making lots of people sick. So the question now is, how can farmers stop using chemicals, regenerate the soil, and continue making enough profit to be happy and keep farming? Because let's be honest, it's just like my last guest on the podcast, Keri Sapsford, said. People are the most important part of this. The farmer needs to be happy. And having a good, profitable farm is key for happy farmers. Ain't nobody happy with too many bills to pay and too little money to pay them. So how can they do it? The answer is simple. Slowly and with intention. It's not feasible to stop using chemical farming overnight. That would just be a disaster. Many farmers and ranchers who have made the transition have told me the land is addicted to the chemicals and you have to wean it off. They also recommend starting small. Maybe it's your smallest field or a portion of a field that is always struggling. You don't have to take your best field and seed it into a 15 cover crop mix. Well, you could if you wanted to. I've read stories online about farmers drastically reducing their input bills with even their first polyculture crops. A dairy in Saskatchewan in a Grain News article said that the first trial they did was barley, oats, and peas planted together. They didn't use any fertilizer because the peas would fix nitrogen. They were spending about $250 per acre trying to grow corn, but with the barley, oats, and peas, their inputs were about $30. And they harvested almost 17 tons per acre of silage, which they had never done with corn, not even close. So start big or start small, but just start. That's the intention. We need more farmers to decide to start going down the path of healing the land. It's a mindset shift, a decision that things are going to change on your farm. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, talk with your spouse or your family if you farm with them and tell them you want change. The shift begins with intention, moving your focus from yield per acre to profit per acre, from chemical dependence to regenerative freedom. Change doesn't just happen. Someone has to decide it's time. And if there's one thing I've learned from the farmers I've met, it's this. When you start to regenerate your land, you also begin to find much more freedom. Freedom from the big chemical input bills, freedom from the stress that comes with fighting nature instead of working with it, freedom from the big company agronomists telling you what GMO crops to plant, and starting to experiment with natural seed mixes to see what grows best on your land and watch the soil respond and change. I know it can sound like a pipe dream, but the amazing and awesome part of all of this is that it's not a dream. It's already happening. There are farmers living this reality right now, and you can too. There's no soil type this doesn't work on. There's no hardiness zone restrictions. These principles work in all conditions. Wherever there is soil, nature is not tilling it, but trying its best to cover it, keep living roots in the soil as much as possible, growing as many different plants as possible, and feeding animals from them in exchange for the manure. We've largely disrupted the animal part of the cycle here. Where millions of buffalo used to roam freely and graze all over this continent, now most land never sees the hoof of any animal all year long. The more we can restore animals and these 5 main principles to the farms we have, the better off we all will be. And that's it. That's the first step on the path for farmers to take when changing from chemicals to naturals. Make the decision in your mind and take a small step towards it. If 1,000 farmers each decided to do that, and say they took an average of 100 acres to start regenerating, that's 100,000 acres starting to heal. And when the land heals, so will the people connected to it. We are not living at maximum health. Far from it. But this is the way we can have a healthier world with healthier food and healthier people. And that's why I'm making this podcast, to do whatever I can to keep spreading the information and the stories of regenerative farming. This knowledge is powerful in the hands of the farmers, and the chemical companies know it, because knowledge is power, and power is protection. Every farmer deserves to know about the power that regenerative farming offers. They deserve to know that it isn't just some fad or trend. It's real, and it can help. And now we have story time. This week I sat down with Keri Sapsford, founder of the Backyard Compost Corner in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Keri calls herself the compost nerd at the Compost Corner, and she's deeply invested in reconnecting people with their soil and waste cycles. Her mission is simple but powerful. Help her community divert food and organic waste from the landfill, improve soil health, and support gardens and homesteads of all sizes. Through her work, Keri supports more than 1,500 clients in composting, running workshops, and consulting on regenerative landscapes. She's trained in compost facility operations, holds a Master Composter certification, and has studied through the Soil Food Web Institute. In our conversation, we dig into how she got started, the challenges of scaling, and community education, and what regenerative landscaping really means in a northern prairie city. Keri also shares her vision for the future and how small local actions can add up to real change in how we think about soil, food, and waste. Let's dive in. Hi, Keri. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you on today. So I'll give a little bit of an intro for you, but just to get a little bit more familiar with you, why don't you tell the listeners who you are, what you do, and where you're located?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's always fun to chat about these kinds of things. So my name is Keri Sapsford. I run the Backyard Compost Corner here in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And my mission with the business is to help people to connect with nature. And some of the ways that we do that are through we have a composting pickup service to help people who live in the city who might not otherwise have a place or knowledge of how to compost. And we do that for them. And then we also sell topsoil, mulch, things that you need to make a garden, so that you can connect with nature in your own backyard. And then sometimes we put on workshops and different things like that, so that we can keep connecting people back to the roots and back to their natural world that we all belong to.
Yeah. I was just looking on your website, and it was showing me. Oh shoot! I'm gonna have to edit this a little bit because now I gotta find it. There it is. Okay. You have this really awesome quote from yourself on your website, which I just love. It says, composting is a daily reminder that what grows from the earth goes back to the earth. And it is a reminder that we are all connected to the land. And I really love how you, without having a physical farm or land that you're farming, you are still connecting people to the land. And I think that is so fascinating. How did you get the idea to start this business? What was your process of this is what I want to do, and how did you get there?
Right. What is a long convoluted? No, I'm just kidding. I grew up on a farm where like composting was just like there was no other way. I didn't realize that other people didn't compost until like I moved away to go to college. Um, and gardening was just a way of life, and like growing things was a way of life. Eating food from that you grew was a way of life. So um, I went to college and then got a job with the city, and just kind of always felt like, okay, well, like I like what I'm doing, but um, still like just want to be in the garden, or um, I want to talk to people who like to do this kind of stuff. And then after I had two kids and great job and whatever, and then got separated from my husband at the time, and then shared custody with the kids. So I had a bit of time to myself that I could do with whatever I wanted. Took a permaculture design course in that time, and then decided that, hey, you know what? I like composting. I can compost other people. And it started out with both at CD Saturday, I believe, and got a couple of people to sign up. And so we just started it um, after work. And then uh, 5 years ago, decided that maybe kind of what I want to do uh, full time. So quit my job and started selling the landscaping supplies, the soil, the mulch, that kind of stuff. And then tried to get more composting clients, and I've been doing it ever since. So, yeah, that's kind of been my journey. Just I wanted to talk to more people who like this kind of stuff. So, might as well get myself into it. It's a lot harder to do that when you're the traffic person for the city. So,
You wanted to talk to more people about it. I feel that too. That's why I started this project.
yeah,
I totally get that. You mentioned something in there. I think you said it was called CD Saturdays, if I'm saying that right. What is that?
it so Series Saturday is something that's been going on here. Well, it goes on all across Canada. It's put on, kind of organized through Seeds of Diversity. And then so each community has their own CD Saturday. And then so you can exchange seeds there. And then local vendors, like people who grow seeds in the local area, come and sell seeds. And they're all local heirloom seeds. So it's just a way of like keeping that diversity of seeds and seed saving and all that kind of stuff within the community. So we do that I've been on the organizing committee there for a couple of years now. So uh, it's it's a cool event. We get to watch documentaries. We have speakers, and it's just a fun afternoon of gardening talk, basically, and getting to know other gardeners in the area and exchanging seeds that we grew here in Prince Albert.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. Okay, that sounds like a really great group. Sounds like it's a gardening group. And you say this happens all over Canada? This is a fairly widespread type of idea?
Yeah, yeah. So Seeds of Diversity helps to like they give us the resources and stuff. So they'll have like different movies and stuff that they'll have access for us to play. And yeah, so it happens all across Canada, and we are one of the ones. I think there's one in Regina, there's one in Saskatoon, and then we have one here in PA. So yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, that's really fun to know about. Let's see. So, getting back to you and what you do, you were telling us so you do the composting, you pick up people's garden waste and kitchen waste and stuff like that, and then you take it, you pile it, you compost it, and then you sell compost and mulch, and you do landscaping and all that good stuff. Um,
Mhm.
I see on your website too, it says gardening and homesteading education. So you do like workshops. And I think you mentioned this too just now. You do the workshops and events and stuff. What has that been like? What do you do with that?
So at the start, when I started this, I wanted to do a lot more workshops, just like bring people together and just local expertise and stuff. And at the start, it was difficult to get people to kind of come out, but we've had a few workshops. Like we've had like a medicine making workshop with herbs or like local plants and stuff. I've had no-till gardening workshops, garlic workshops. Now I've kind of uh, I also started a gardening club that's separate from the business. And that it's just a bunch of gardeners that get together every month and either tour something or learn something. And so we've been doing more workshops in there, just kind of each member kind of goes, oh, well, I know something about this. So this weekend we're having a garlic growing workshop at my house or garlic planting workshop at my house. So yeah, it's ever evolving. If I find something or someone that can come in and do a talk, then we will make that happen. And then I've done like I do composting workshops every year and different stuff like that. So just trying to figure out what's the best for what people are looking for and see if we can find the expertise in the area.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. The garlic, that is something I find interesting. I actually have always bought garlic from the store up until really just recently. I finally found some local garlic and I
Yeah.
brought it home and tried it, and it is so juicy compared to the stuff I used to buy from the store. Oh my goodness, it's just
Right.
amazing garlic, and it tastes so good. I can't believe the difference.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of a difference just like I think it's just that it's so fresh when you get it locally that it hasn't had time to dry out or whatever. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Um, so this is all just like fantastic stuff, and I love hearing about everything you're doing, and it just begs the question, why do you do what you do? What was inside of you that was like, this is my passion? What makes it your drive?
a very good question. I think just growing up on a farm, it was just kind of a way of life, and it was odd to me that it wasn't a way of life for everybody else. Um, and it just made sense that we are part of nature and like that we have a part to play in it. And then after having like it was just something that I always did. But then after having kids, you kind of look towards the future and the future that you want them to live in. And you're like, oh, I don't want them to like, you know, be always on their computer or like just be on the online world all the time. I want them to be part of the actual world and know where their food comes from and see that they can make a difference and they can have a business if they want to. They can create change if they want to. They can kind of do whatever they want. And I think working with food and with land is one of the most satisfying and um, I don't know how else to describe it, but like it just so uh, it feels so good to work for land. Like if you talk to always think about when you talk to farmers, they're like, yeah, well, I'll never quit this because it's just such a part of their life and they love it so much. You don't usually talk to like a bank manager or whatever. They're like, oh, I could never not do this, or like whatever. But the farmers, they definitely have that connection uh, with land, and they just never want to give it up. Uh, More so maybe in the last couple generations. I think this generation has been a lot of stress, more so than previous. But I know my dad, my grandpa, they were all very much connected to land, and like you go for a walk in the pasture with my dad, and he can tell you like, oh, that's that plant, that's that plant, and this mushroom's okay, this mushroom is not, or oh, I saw a coyote today, or a bird, or like they know all the stuff that's going on, and and the stuff that matters to me. I don't know. It's cooler to me that when the prairie chickens come out to do their mating dance, and you know who the coolest person on the internet is at the moment.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? We kind of get lost in our perspective. Social media can really absorb a person, and society has definitely been sucked into that direction without a doubt. Doom scrolling is such a thing nowadays, and it really does feel like it's disconnected us from our food. And that's been a conversation for quite some time now, is how disconnected consumers are from where their food comes from. And I definitely have been seeing that there is a lot of people out there who do want to be reconnected to their food. And I just think it's fantastic that you and lots of other farmers out here that I have been interviewing are selling their beef, directly to consumers. And like, there are consumers trying to bridge that gap, and there's farmers and business people like yourself also trying to bridge that gap and reaching back towards each other to, yeah,
Right.
that
Yeah.
connect that's grown there.
Yeah. And if we just keep complaining that nobody's connected to their food anymore, nothing ever is going to change. So, uh, just being there and being able to have something that you can reach out and say, here, I'll help you, or whatever. So, it's like, I compost out at the Conservation Learning Center. We have a partnership out there. And so I volunteer with them for their education days as well. And so they have like a egg in the classroom fall farm day and spring farm day. And it's really amazing to watch a bunch of grades 3, 4, and 5 um, kids come and like plant potatoes and like eat a carrot right out of the garden, and like they get so excited about like it's like a treasure hunt to find the potatoes when they're harvesting them, and they learn about soil. They get to see goats, and yeah, so it's quite eye opening to see like some kids know a lot, and some kids have no idea that even grows out of the soil.
Oh, yeah. That is such a
Yeah,
great thing to be doing, man. I remember being a kid and pulling carrots up out of the dirt, and that was my favorite thing out of the garden. And you just brush off the dirt, just bite into that.
yeah,
Oh, and it tasted so good. Yeah, that's
yeah,
fantastic. That's great to be involved in that sort of stuff, because that's definitely some core memory stuff right there for those kids. And oh yeah, and that reminds me of your Facebook post too about that. Actually, you did a really fun thing with some underwear. Why don't you tell us about that?
yeah. So at the fall or the farm day at the Conservation Learning Center, in the spring, we took some cotton underwear, men's underwear with the elastic on top, and we buried it in the soil. And then so we were testing to see kind of how much microbial activity was in the soil. So because it's cotton can break down, and microbes can break it down and eat it or whatever, it was a good way to test. And then the elastic band won't stick around forever. So we planted them, we buried them in June, and then this last week we dug them up, and most of the underwear that we pulled up was the cotton was completely gone and had broken down entirely, and it was just the elastic waistband left. So, which was kind of cool, and it was interesting also to see some of the stuff at Prairies was less broken down than other stuff. So there were spots in the garden that were maybe more microbially active. I don't know how to say that word, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was kind of cool to see, um, and for the kids to see that like dirt just isn't that, or not dirt, soil isn't just this inert thing under our feet. It's full of life and it's doing stuff. It's not just sitting there waiting for a plant to grow. So
Yeah, I think that's been something from the interviews that I've been doing and from my own personal learning experience. It feels like that's quite a new thing that, for the last few generations, we haven't really looked at the soil as a place where anything lives, except for just as a place to put the roots for the roots to go down and to get enough water on it if it's not irrigated.
right.
So that's a real mindset shift. How has that been something you've discovered? Like, did you always think of it that way, or how did you get thinking that to that effect?
Oh, that's a good question. Because I haven't always thought that way. It was just kind of, you put seeds in the garden and they grow and whatever.
Mm.
And you put stuff in the compost and eventually it turns into something that looks like oil again. Um, and so it wasn't until I think it was when I took my permaculture design course that we really talked about the soil food web and just how like the interactions between the roots and the microorganisms in the soil and just like all that all that stuff happening underneath the soil that is actually making it work instead of just being that those nutrients. It's a living organism under there, or like a city almost. That yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
food webs above the ground. We have food webs that make things work underground. So
Mhm. Yeah. It's really interesting to be learning about that because it definitely is. It seems like a new thing that's really come up in the last few years where we're really starting to understand what's really going on in the soil, and it is just fascinating. Um, I've been learning about I went recently and did a farm tour. I posted about it on the last episode where I got to see some results of bale grazing. And that was just so incredible to see where the bales were placed were just night and day difference compared to where,
right,
it hadn't reached. And it just was so incredible to see that the soil there was really hungry for those nutrients from the cattle manure, from the leftover the organic matter of the bale, I suppose, is probably the right way to do that. Um, can you tell me a bit about, like, with the gardening and the stuff that you teach that way, what are the practices that you tell people or that you're teaching of how to use these practices in a garden setting?
okay. Well, I think most of what I try to promote or whatever is just kind of practices that help with soil health. And so that can look like a lot of the no-till gardening practices. And so I think I'll see if I can remember them all. But I had kind of talk about 5 different things that help with soil health. And the first one is uh, keep living roots in soil. And so that's just so that those microorganisms can have those exchanges between the exudates that the roots put out and the whatever the waste from the bacteria can be eaten by the roots, all that kind of stuff. There's just always that exchange happening when you leave living roots in the soil. We've known about like having diversity in our plants is good just because of pests and stuff. So if you don't put like all your onions in one place or whatever, so you don't get, or you don't keep putting them in the same place, you don't keep getting the same bug coming back every year.
Mhm.
But it also has to do with the soil. If you've got different root structures, one's a taproot, one's a wide root, you've got different interactions happening at different places. Another one is to cover your soil. So that's with mulch or with just plants on top of your soil. That's kind of like the no-till, where the no-till comes in.
Mhm.
Um, is because you're protecting the soil. It's not getting that the heat from the sun to burn it out and dry it up. It keeps it a little bit cooler. When you want it a little bit cooler, it also prevents weeds from coming up the bed. And then it also keeps it moist in there. So you don't have to water as much. When it breaks down, it adds organic material back into the garden. The other principle was to reduce tillage. So whenever we're tilling, we're breaking up like any of the mycelium network from the fungi, the roots of the fungi. Those are kind of highways for nutrient stuff to pass through. And then whenever we're tilling it, we're breaking those up. So it's got to start all over again. So in our forests, in our prairie ecosystems and whatever, they've got living roots, they've got cover on the soil, there's not tilling. Those are very productive and very healthy soils usually. So, and then the fifth one was to add amendments like compost or manure or different things like that. So I just kind of helps speed up the process. I always like to think of compost as like probiotics or you put in that you take to keep your gut microbiome healthy. Compost is kind of like a probiotic for your soil. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet for all those microorganisms, and so they're exploding in life. So you're putting that back on your soil and inoculating that with some microorganisms. So, right, I think that was fun. I think I actually remember them.
Some people describe it as integrating livestock is a common way to say it, but because you're not going to go and like run cows over your garden. So you're, adding with amendments that way and just taking from the compost to do the same thing.
Yeah. Actually, my son just got rabbits, so we'll be incorporating animals or some fertilizer to the garden this year for sure.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that rabbit manure is actually fantastic. You can just put it even straight onto soil. It doesn't need to, like, say, compost. Like, chicken manure is a bit strong kind of stuff, but rabbit manure, you can just, it's really great to just put straight on the top of the garden.
Oh, I'm excited about that. So,
yeah, I'll have to get an update from you and see what happens with that. So you mentioned not tilling. And that has been a big thing. Big podcast too, of course. Lots of farmers have talked about that in their farm settings. But I'm so curious about that in a garden setting because, like for example, say my mom has a garden and she's been finding that it's been getting compacted and hard. And she keeps tilling it. We were just having a discussion about it just recently when I was showing her a YouTube video about, how that tilling compacts your soil. And she says to me, she's like, but I'm so used to doing it. And, yes, like in that garden setting, we're so used to tilling the garden. So,
we're really a hard habit to do, I guess. Hey, when I started doing no-till, I found it very frustrating as well because it's just not the same as what you're used to. And I got pathways with wood chips in, and then just kind of left everything on the top in the bed. Now, when I make a new no-till garden, because for some reason I've made a number of them, I'll till everything first to get it all nice and fluffy. Then I'll cut the pathways in, so then it's a little bit easier to deal with, and it's like it feels like a tilled garden. And then if you are able to keep it moist and mulch it a lot, then you don't get compaction because you're not stepping on it. So you're not compacting it that way. The mulch is protecting it from like the compacting effects of rain. And then when it keeps moist, there's all that life happening in there. So all the worms are making their holes in there, and I can't remember what it's called, but like it clumps up a little bit in like little tiny pockets.
Yes, there is a word for that. Yeah, let me look it up here.
There's a word for it, and I can't remember it, but yeah, it stays really nice and healthy if all those things are happening. I noticed in my garden because sometimes I do what I say, not what I do. I do mulch I forget. Is part of my garden that should have been? Pardon?
Is the word aggregates that we were looking for?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Yes, aggregation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yes, I have noticed with us not getting rain for like a month and a half this summer, the time of my garden is compacted and hard. But the parts that were mulched and stayed moist are nice and healthy still, that you can dig your hands right down into it and plant a garlic or do whatever you want with it. So
Oh, wow. So you're saying that's the difference between areas that weren't covered and areas that are covered?
yeah.
Wow. So even after a month and a half of no rain, and you've noticed that difference on the exposed soil, it's definitely hardened up and suffered. But on soil that you had covered, you can actually just still dig into it and it still has moisture?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And like we've had a bit of moisture since then, so like that's why there's moisture in there. But of the stuff I had a bed in the front, and I had mulched it shortly after I planted it, and then it's been covered with squash and beans and corn and whatever, but it's never really like had to have the harsh effects of the sun on it. And I was thinking about that I might have to like take a broad fork and like um loosen it up a little bit before this garlic workshop. But I stuck my hand in and I can dig down my full hand width, hand length, I guess, and it's still nice and it's healthy in there. So
Wow.
but then other spot, it's like big chunks coming out. So like that I hadn't covered yet.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, yes. And you just mentioned the tilling fork. No, what was the name you just had for it?
Oh, broad fork.
Broad fork. Broad fork. Would you suggest if somebody did want to say move their soil a bit or lift it up a bit, is that better than say like a tilling machine that's gonna like really overwork the soil?
I like the broad fork for that for sure. And what it does is it just you stick your fork in and kind of loosen it up, so it creates those air spaces that water can get in and air can get in, but you're not flipping the soil. So if you get an okay job of like getting the weeds off of that top layer, then you're not bringing new weed seeds to the top. Like the tilling machine will take the stuff on the bottom and flip it to the top, so you've got a whole new bed of weed seeds.
Right.
Or keep the same dirt soil on top, and you're able to like that first year you might get a really good flush of weeds. Second year you'll have less, and so you'll be able to kind of have more weeds or less weed pressure, I guess. If you're not flipping it, so that's why I like the broad fork.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, that's very logical. And then you also mentioned
it does take a bit of like manual labor to go through your whole garden, but just get the gym for the day.
yeah, that's right. It's just all good. It's good. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it, and you'll have the muscles to show for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had also mentioned diversity, and you were just mentioning that one front bed where you're going to be putting garlic. It sounded like you had several different plants in there. What was it? Corn and some squash. Maybe you had like that Three Sisters thing going on there. Was that the idea?
I did try the Three Sisters, yes, and I've learned this a number of times, and I keep forgetting that I need to put the corn in first so that it grows up a little bit taller before I start planting the beans and the squash. Just because my corn always suffers because everything else is so quick and like it's going really fast, and then the corn's like, oh, I'm here, but nothing's climbing on me. So yeah, but the beans and squash did well. So I got so many squash, and I had and we always grew like bush beans when I was a kid, and now I've started to grow like pole beans or like climbing beans.
Oh yeah,
it's so much more productive than like I think I was pulling beans off yesterday that I was eating, and I started harvesting them in like July.
Oh,
so I've had a good 2 months of bean harvest. So I felt pretty good about that one.
And you know what's so cool about the system you've got going on is that you can be harvesting all of that from those plants, and you're actually not depleting the soil by doing it. Everything that you're putting out, actually, you're going to be putting back even more, like with the compost and just keeping things covered and letting the microbes do their thing without tilling them. We can actually harvest so much from this system, and it is so sustainable. It's just, I'm excited to be talking to people like you and learning about all of this. It's so great.
Yeah. It reminds me of, like, I've read the audiobook Braiding Sweetgrass, which I highly recommend to anybody who's interested in this kind of stuff. But it just the whole theme of the book is like our reciprocal or um, our duty for reciprocity to nature. Like, yeah, we're going to harvest it because that's the gifts that we get, but we also give back by composting, by paying attention to like what we're doing in the soil and making sure it's covered and all that kind of stuff. So when I think about whatever I think about gardening, so
That's called Braiding Sweetgrass. Fantastic. That looks like a good book. I'll have to get my hands on that. I've got quite a stack here I'm working on because I'm diving head first into all this regenerative books, and there is a surprising amount of them out there.
yeah, I highly do recommend listening to the audiobook because it's the author that reads it, and she's like, it's like sitting around a fire with your grandma, and she's just telling you the stories about all the things. It's amazing.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. I do a lot of driving for my work, so that'll be perfect. Fantastic.
There you go.
Well, this has been like a fantastic conversation. I do have to say goodbye at some point, so thank you so much for being on the show. If somebody wants to connect with you, where should they find you online?
So they can find us at backyardpa.ca is our website, and also on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes I'm on TikTok even. So, and I think the handles are just the Backyard Compost Corner. If you just search out the Backyard and Compost Corner, you should be able to find me.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And a quick reminder of upcoming events. The Manitoba Forage and Grassland Association's Regenerative Conference is happening on November 12th and 13th in Brandon, Manitoba. This year's theme is Enriching Land, Lives, and Livelihoods. The conference will feature an incredible lineup of keynote speakers. Then, looking ahead to the new year, Holistic Management Canada is hosting its annual conference on February 6th through 8th in Taber, Alberta. These conferences are an incredible way to recharge, network, and bring fresh ideas back to your farm. There are also other smaller events, both online and in person, happening in between, and you can find information about those on the RFN media pages where I keep updated posts about upcoming events. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Regenerative Farming News. And of course, a huge thank you to my guest, Keri Sapsford, for sharing her story and her perspective as a composting expert and educator. Keri's journey is proof that you don't have to have a farm to be part of the regenerating community. A few square feet of dirt can be turned into a regenerative garden that produces fresh, super nutritious food. And remember to follow RFN on our social media pages. It's the best place to catch updates, behind-the-scenes content, and connect with a growing community of people who care about healthier soils and stronger farms. Heather Heinrichs, signing off. Together, we can grow healthier soil, stronger farms, and a more resilient future.